Hello, and you're very, very welcome to the MongoDB podcast once again. I'm Shane McAllister. I'm one of the leads in our developer relations team here at MongoDB. And today we've got a fascinating discussion lined up where we're tackling the crucial topic of database permissions and going deep on a discussion with my guests later on, from fine-grained policies to RAG security. But before I get started and before we get into the meat of today's topic, if you're new to the podcast live streams, it's great to have you. You're very, very welcome. Do visit the MongoDB YouTube channel to check out past episodes. And if you're a returning viewer, you're very, very welcome back. And thanks for joining once again. The sharp-eyed amongst you might know that I'm not on my usual space. Internet problems today, hence it shows that it's a live stream and we're doing these things live. So different room, but still the same quality of show, hopefully. So while we get ready for today's stream, drop a shout out in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're joining us from. And we really do love to hear from the fantastic viewers. As ever, the live stream is being recorded and will be on MongoDB's YouTube channel and LinkedIn after the show. So don't worry if you missed the start or can't stay for all of it. You can catch the recording later on at any time at your leisure. And once the show kicks off in earnest, feel free to pop any burning questions you have for our guest today into the chat. And we're going to tackle them live or wrap them up at the end. We do really, really appreciate the interactivity. So with that, let's get on with the show. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's critical for every developer, but often fraught with complexity: database permissions. And to guide us, we're thrilled to have Gabriel Manor from permit.io to join us to talk us through all of this. Gabriel, you're very welcome to the MongoDB podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me today. I think it's super exciting to be here. I'm a big fan of Mongo since like the early days, 2012. I always hate schematic databases, and when Mongo came up, I was just, okay, I have a place to persist my data without worrying about tables and complex queries and joins. So yeah, it's an honor for me to be here today to talk about permissions and Mongo.
Excellent. Well, look, it's really great to have you on. So before we get into the meat of today's topic, can you share a little bit about yourself and your journey to date and what got you so focused in this world and your journey to permit.io?
Yeah, so I think I'll start from the end. For the last 2 years, I'm leading the developer relations at Permit.io, and I'm trying to advocate and enable developers around fine-grained permissions. We'll talk a lot about permissions and fine-grained permissions today, so I'll just give it a quick brief. Usually, permissions is part of everywhere in application. And when you do permissions, you usually, or the coarse grained is about checking one factor, who is the user, and then they are allowed or not. Fine-grained permissions, I love to define it in a way that you check in multiple factors. What is the exact type of the document that you try to get to, or what is the exact attribute of the data? And speaking about permission, I think it tells a lot about my career. I started to work as a software developer back in 2010.
Okay.
And in 2015, I joined Cisco to work on a network access product, a product that do authentication, verify user identity and authorization, check permissions for network users. And 1 year after I joined there, they got a decision to rewrite everything on the policy engine, the engine that actually do permissions for the user. And because I have some background with front end and with user experience, I choose to lead the front end part. And then became a ride of 4, maybe even 5 years until the mid 2020, where I just did everything around authorization, from writing policy engines to try the most edge or top-notch technologies like Open Policy Agent. And that brings me also to the community of identity access management. So beside of being like the usual software developer who get excited from Java or JavaScript, I also got a glimpse into the world of identity access management and authorization and became part of the community. And then I work also in Palo Alto networks. And 2 years ago, as I mentioned, our Permit CEO came to me and we got an introduction, and he told me, I heard that you're a developer that also love permissions and access control. And we are looking for someone like this. So in my day-to-day, I'm mostly advocating around this world of fine-grained permissions. There is a lot of trends today in this space. To name some: Google Zanzibar, attribute-based access control, fine-grained authorization. And I'm everywhere that developer needs me. And Permit.io is develop a platform that helps developer with implementing fine-grained permissions. We have a platform where they can define permission, where they can sync the data. Data is a crucial part when you need permissions, either to authorize the data or to use the data to authorize actions. So for example, the relationships between users and departments can determine what permissions they have on documents that or data that belongs to this department. And as part of that, I'm leading the developer advocacy. Something interesting in Permit is usually the developer relations reporting to marketing. So here, marketing reporting to me.
As we do here, yes, yeah.
We try to, look on it from the bottom up, because we believe that developers do not need just the nice brand awareness lines. They need to worry about the real things that happen behind the hood. And I'll say that from that perspective, there are multiple aspects for permissions in application. There is the aspect of the application itself. You need logic to drive that. There is the aspects of gateways and how are the users access to the API gateways, proxies, etc. So there is also aspect where you need permissions, but something that getting grown is how do you control permissions in databases? Because this is the place where you start everything. The data itself, the data that you persist, the data that determine permissions. And this is why for the last year, I'm focusing, I think, 40%, or maybe with the more AI we go in LLMs, maybe 60, 70% of my time in things that related to data, to large language models, to AI permissions, agent permissions, etc.
Perfect. Well, look, you've given me a good overview of the path to date. It's fascinating, and obviously it's a domain that you find specifically interesting and challenging. So it's great that you got that opportunity within Permit. Typically, you've talked a little bit about the core problem that Permit solves, but typically, who are Permit's customers?
So it's software developers. Like let's separate between customers and users.
Okay.
The users are always software developers. Most of them more in the backend / data side of it. Today, more so-called the AI engineers or data science, and need is heriting.
You always get one or two of the comments that way. All right.
Yeah. So usually like full stack backend data engineers. The customers is very interesting because Permit is, as I mentioned, we are very like bottom up. We are working with developers. Our first citizen is developers, but permissions is something that I have a friend, Hannah Sutor. She's working as a identity access management product manager on GitLab, and she always said that permissions or authorization is a revenue-driven security feature. Usually, security feature is something that you just put because you must or because someone make you fear. If you look on SaaS companies, you'll see that RBAC or permission is something that you can charge money on. So many times, the developers just start with something small, and then the product management or the business function can say, hey, we want more fine-grained because we have compliance requirement, because we can make more money of it, because we can monetize it, etc., etc. And that get a requirement that is very technical to the developers. So developers search for a way that can enable them without changing all the tables in the DB and do all the works in the internals. So the first citizen users are usually developers. Some of these developers became our customers, but some of our customers is just business function who want a good experience in managing permissions while they also give that to developers. I think that another interesting aspect in the last couple of years is the topic of permissions delegation. Usually, if you spend some time in computer science or in software engineering, you're probably familiar with MAC and DAC, mandatory access control and discretionary access control. With discretionary access control, we are giving the users the ability to control their permissions. But in coarse-grained, it's easy. You let the user control roles. When you need to do a lot of like moving parts to get the right permissions done, delegating permissions to the user became more and more challenging. And this is one of our key areas in Permit. We are having a very good set of APIs and even UI component that allows the developers to delegate the permissions control to the users. And that's also interesting from the database permissions aspect, but we'll get to that soon.
Okay, and obviously the show description we talk about says permissions matter. Why do they matter now more than ever, particularly in the kind of modern cloud native world that we live in and where we build our applications?
This is a great question. I think this is something that I started to answer the first day I started to work at Permit, and it didn't change because I can count 4 trends. I'll not get too deep into that, but the first one is, of course, the architecture that became more and more distributed. We want to streamline the policies. We don't want that every like cloud native moving parts that we put everywhere will have a different set of policies. Not only that, we get with the more cloud native world and the more cloud native architectures enable us, many of our software is just building blocks, right? If you take database of like 10, 12 years ago, a lot of the logic that today became part of the database was something that sits in the application itself. And we want all these moving parts to streamline together to one policy. And this is why the first reason. The second one is the stakeholders that we have to the code or to the application. It could be like, it could be the DevOps, the SecOps, the RevOps, and with AI, everyone became a developer. Everyone became someone who wanted to open Lovable and contribute something to the product, and they want to try to do something. And the third is, of course, the amount of data that we are processing. The more data, the more permissions this data need, and the more permissions that the data is actually determined. And the fourth, and I think it's one of the most important ones, is actually the user requirements. Users today are aware of privacy, aware of security, and aware of collaboration. And all these three, especially collaboration, is something that requires permission. I want to get the ownership of the data and understand that as a user, I can give the relevant access to other stakeholders in the application.
I see. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously touches everything. I suppose, look, Gabriel, we're going to get into the meat of things and get a bit more practical, but when we hear and think about permissions and access, there's horror stories out there, right? We've seen essentially the breaches and the breaks and the leaks, etc., as well too. You know, what are, in your view, not naming names or anything like that, but you know, what are the biggest risks or horror stories that you've seen in your experience in this space, Gabriel?
Yeah, so I actually have a lot to share because, you know, part of access control is also security, and I'm aware of that, and I'm part of also, beside of the access control, I mean, it's always access control goes together with security. And I actually started my career in Israel, and Israel is a space where it's tons of security startups. I know the community, but I thought about a story that is very relevant for databases. There was many databases offer you row-level security, a way that you configure policy rules on specific rows in the application. And I think one of the biggest problem with permissions that not managed well is there is multiple names to that. It can be the role explosion, it can be the allow all rules, but the more complex you get, the more chance that someone will just create and override allow all rules to everyone in the application.
Yeah,
and
human all right. Yeah, these things happen.
So one story about that is that, I mean, you say without names, but that story that everyone in the internet reads, and I also wrote a thought leadership piece on that. So you know, the Arc browser, I'm a big fan of the browser company. I'm using the Arc browser, and they use Firebase as their backend, and they use row-level security in Firebase. And someone found that they, from some reason, and they had policy on the table, so someone did the research, but they found that they open some sort of allow all read for all the I can't remember now the name. They have some widgets that you can put, like extensions that you can
Yes.
in your browser. And for this particular table, they just put allow all on this row. And if you just have a user ID of another user, you can just get all their extensions, including passwords, cookies,
Okay.
sessions, etc. And that's a classic example of like something that you try to secure, but then the business requirement came and try the business requirement actually override. They probably just try to allow some share extension. They try to allow some collaboration between user, and then something became complex, and then just developer came and okay, I allow everything. What could happen, right? And I think that managing permissions properly and understanding that being aware of fine-grained and what it is mean and the models, etc., can really help with streamlining permissions better and not have this pitfall.
Excellent. No, yeah, and it's a good, relatively recent example, high profile as well too. But we all know that this is a key concern for most companies, most developers, most people building applications that are being used out in the public. It's great to see that people joining us from all over the world, from India and everywhere else, as Indonesia as well too. So Kala and Hemant and Raphael, lovely to have you join us here as well too. So as we go through today's show, if you have any questions for Gabriel, please throw them in there. So I said we're going to get a bit practical. So, and we've got a wide and varied audience, Gabriel, for our show here. So we don't, necessarily, yes, core developers, but across the range of technical space as well too. So, but from a developer perspective, starting a new project, what's the right way to think about permissions? I often find developers are, attracted by the shiny new stuff. So they want to build the application, they want to put all the pieces together, et cetera, et cetera. And then afterwards, permissions and security, et cetera, are layered on top. They're not necessarily the first thing that they should think about. So to do it right, what should they be thinking out at the start of any new project?
It's interesting you ask that, because as you know, as all of us, I'm also trying to be on edge with all this vibe coding and try to find project code and something. And I had an idea over the weekend that I tried to start with, and I was like, this need permissions. And I thought to myself, maybe I'm biased. Maybe after 2.5 years that I'm at Permit, the first thing I'm thinking about is permission. If I work in observability, that was observability. If I work at, I don't know. And then I understood what is the key point that make permission super important. And this is a collaboration. Every application today, when you manage identities, and I want to take the wider words for that. So the word you usually use is subject or principal, the entity that try to do actions. They built in hierarchical way. So you have, for example, admins, an admin account, and in every account you might have, for example, tenants, and every tenant can have more business-oriented way to segmentize users, departments, groups, and even things that users create themselves, the users, the end users of the application. So I think in every kind of modern application, thinking of permissions, at least basic permissions, is a must. And from my experience, the best way to start permissions is think about the users. And users, of course, can be human users or machine identities. Could be like, for example...
more and more these days, right?
Yeah, I mean, but we not even must get into the non-human users. Like, you probably want to have users and you want to have more interfaces like APIs or the word that I promise that I'll not say, but some sort of tooling on top of your product that help AI to access your application, right? But this access need to be managed. And I think when you try to draw for yourself the levels of access, it's always good to start with the user. And the reason it helps is because you can start coarse-grained. I don't think that every application need to start fine-grained. So that's the first part. So when plan from the subject or from the users. The second is, and I think this is super important, and maybe I'm biased because I'm from working at Permit and we are developing policy engine, but doesn't mean you need to use Permit. There are tons of open source. Permit also is, the core is open source, but there are tons of solutions like policy engines. Even coarse-grained should be decoupled from the code. I think that's the most important part. these days of code that ask if a user is admin, allow operation, this is something that we need to pass. We need to live in the past. And the way to do it is actually externalize it. And again, it doesn't matter if you have a authorization microservice or you use a platform or you just use Open Policy Agent or Open FGA or any other standalone policy engine. The code itself, the code logic, should always ask about the abstract meaning of permissions. The usual query is a query that includes 3 arguments. Think about a function. You get 3 arguments: user, the action they try to do, and the resource. And you can get more fine-grained in the user attributes and the relation between user and but the idea is that to keep the code clean, to keep the logic clean, the authorization queries should start with these 3 in an abstract way. And with the result, you can get a decision. But the policy need to be externalized to the application, because if it get to the application first, it's hard to streamline. Second, it's super hard to maintain, because every time something changes in the logic, you need to change. And 3, it became centralized in the wrong places. Think about it like a domain that you need to own. And if it just part of it is here, part of it is here, and then you need to connect data, then you create a lot of dependencies. So externalizing the authorization and decouple it from the code, I think is a super, from the technical perspective, it is super important for us. Another aspect is the layers that you want to authorize user. We're here to discuss about permissions in the database, but permissions are kind of everywhere. Permissions are in the front end that you need to flag features. So some users some features, so other something else. It's in the logic of the application, because not always the transactions are not always atomic from the perspective of the permission. Sometimes one transaction could have a chain of permissions that you want to check. And of course, the way that you read and write data from the database is also a perspective of permissions. So externalizing it and decoupling it really helps to streamline and keep the power of permission and security out of the application itself.
Okay. Yeah, there's an awful lot to think about there, obviously, for any developer starting down this path. You touched on them all right, and you mentioned them earlier too, about the 2 more advanced ways are the role-based access control and also the attribute-based access control. Tell us a little bit about when you should consider using either or is it a combination, Gabriel, as well too?
Yeah. So actually, I want to add another access control model to the party, which is relationship-based access control. This is super trending now because back in 2018, Google released a paper called Google Zanzibar. There are already some open source, very successful actually, open source implementation for Google Zanzibar. Google Zanzibar described the relationship-based access control. I'll start with the role-based access control, which is the one that most of the people know. Role-based access control means user has different roles, and we can determine to what resources they have access with these roles. Now, role-based access control traditionally was more coarse-grained, but you can do it more fine-grained if you combine data. So, for example, you can assign user role only in a level of a tenant or account, or you can use role-based access control in a hierarchical way. So you can determine, for example, if a user has the specific only for the particular document that belong to particular tenant. The problem with role-based access control usually is the problem that I mentioned, similar to the role-level security, is so-called role exploding. So if you are trusting on the schema of the roles, you very soon end up with 50K roles, and then it's became really hard to manage. The more fine-grained native models is the one you mentioned, the attribute-based access control and relationship-based access control. Attribute-based access control, and actually, if people from the audience, if the audience is familiar with the new Cedar language policies on MongoDB, this is very fine-grained policies that take the attributes on our data, the attributes on our users. For example, data has tons of attributes. Every object has built of attributes. Every user could have attributes, where they are from, what department they are belonging, etc. And with this attribute, you can build conditions. For example, you can say, my policy rule allow EU users to do transactions or to read transactions that belong to EU country. I don't know. I mean, but this condition can get very fine-grained. The nice thing about it is that you don't need the data in the authorization service to determine the permission, because if you query the policy engine with the right attributes, you'll get back the results. So it's more powerful for a stateless environment. It's more powerful for decentralized environment, etc. Relationship-based access control, on the other hand, is if you remember, like again, the old days, there was the concept of access control lists. So we maintain tons of lists, like every user has access to this list of documents. Now the relationship-based access control say, instead of maintaining this one, because that can easily get into tons of lists and significant, like crazy amounts of data, if we just keep it in a flat list, it say, instead of keeping the permissions in a list, let's keep it in a graph. And then every entity in the system has only one node in the graph. So every document has one node, every user has one node. And by the relationship between the entities and the users, we can determine permissions. And this way, we can, in an efficient way, to keep the graph relatively small, because let's say I believe that Google Zanzibar's graph is about, I don't know, trillions of nodes, or I don't know. But I mean, can be relatively small, and can be very, very fast, because graph algorithm to traverse a graph could be super fast, right? So for example, if Gabriel has an account on YouTube, and this YouTube account connected to their Google Ads account, and this Google Ads account connected to the Google Drive, then in one traverse, I can understand, okay, they can access this file on Google Drive because they have all the relationship. This hence relationship-based access control.
Gotcha.
You can get the pros, because if you need to query data, it's very efficient, it's super fast. If you need to query what a user is allowed to, what department they belong to, etc. But it needs you to save data in the authorization service. So this is kind of overhead that came with it. I'll say that usually what we are recommending in permit is to combine between role and relationship, or roles and attributes, because you can find the similarity. Adding conditions of attributes on top of relationship exists. I mean, the functionality exists. You can model it, but usually you want to go always with one of the scenarios, because you want to keep performing, right? Attribute is super performant in distributed stateless. Relationship is super performant in a significant amount of data that you can centralize, at least the data itself. Combining them can create overhead that is hard to track. So our usual recommendation is use relationship when you need, use attributes when you need, and control the experience with roles that can connect into the two other models.
Okay. And I suppose that kind of complex approach to those rules could come at a trade-off with performance in your application, for example. Can it? And how do you balance security versus performance in that requirement?
Yeah, I mean, there is no one answer to this question.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's even complex with the famous "it depends." But again, it's about the use case. Our recommendation is always think about the user experience, and not saying like, I want fine-grained, so I'll just not use role-based access control. For like, if you think about even complex application, for the user experience and for the question, if you have policy-based role-based access control, means you can put some sort of data like tenants and attributes on the roles, etc. Then you can get role-based access control for 50-60% of your use case. And then when you need more complex, you can build on the same policy engine more models. And one of the things that we are usually recommend is to not do write policies on relationship-based access control, because usually write policies need the consistency that is sometimes hard to get with when you need to propagate your data. So you probably want to keep the consistency in a model that fit on what you need. Attribute-based access control can be scientific proof to be super fast and consistent, because you don't need all the data centralized in one place. So it's super important for write operations. For read operations, attribute access control can be hard, because you can't, for example, get the IDs that you need or something like that. And usually with read operations, you have less consistency trade-offs. So you can, for example, have eventual consistency and know that even if you got now not the most up-to-date list of data, the next time they will not get. And if the user will try to write, then it will get to the attribute-based access control. So understanding the trade-off is mostly thinking about the consistency and the criticality of the decision, and also the trade-offs. Sometimes you can, for example, see that like a prospect that your graph DB of the relationship will be huge and decentralized and need to be decentralized, and then you can think how you bridge this gap with attributes, etc. I think that the tools that we have today and the status that we have today, we discussed about it earlier, but the compliance and so on, and even the AI making organization really in a need and really in understand that, and the community see that, and the tools getting better and better on a daily basis. And I mean, it sounds complex, but it also complex to choose the right, I don't know, API gateway for your need. It also could be complex to choose the right caching product that you need. So it's all, at the end, it's a question of trade-off, and it's fascinating domain, and that's one of the reasons that I really like it.
It certainly is, and look, it's certainly not an area at all that I'm experienced in. So it's been great to hear your insights and valuable experience there. I suppose moving towards a more real-world example, Gabriel, you wrote a fantastic article on multi-tenancy, role-based authorization with MongoDB. Could you talk a little bit through that? And I know we're going to see some example later on as well too, or if it suits to share it now as well too. But talk us through a little bit of that, because that tenancy is really important, that tenant A cannot see what tenant B can see, etc. as well too, and vice versa, right?
Absolutely. I think I want to take a little intro to the thing of database permissions. There is a little confusion. As you know, I have goals in my job, and I need to make sure that SEO works well, and that the articles that I'm writing is usually, unfortunately, we call it distribution-driven articles. I have tons of ideas for cool articles, but I know that I don't have a way to distribute, so I'll never write them. And when I wrote the article about the permissions in MongoDB, I found that there are multiple levels of permissions in databases, and I need to be accurate on what I'm talking about. So the first layer is the permissions that provided by MongoDB itself, the permissions of the users of the databases. The operational user that deploy the databases, the developer that they need access to it, the application that need keys to the application, right? So this is the part of the database permissions that usually the database is supported. And Mongo has a good support in it. It was only RBAC, but now with the CDR policy, it became even more fine-grained. So, and this is not what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm going to talk about today is the data permissions. You have data in your DB, and you want to control the access for this data. Who can access which subsets of and parts of the data, and what operations they can put on it, right? Now, the easy way to do that is to, I mean, not the easy, but the way that many people are doing it, they are decoupling the role-based access control from the database. So they need only to worry about the schema, what role Shane has, what role Gabriel has, and then the application do the logic. In reality, applications, especially in databases that are cloud native and do not enforce you to create a new database or a new instance for every user, and they are schemaless and give you the comfortability of just create a collection that connect the data of all our users, it's super important that we have also fields or attributes that determine where this data belongs to. Right. So, and there is, of course, I'll not get into the approaches if we need to do tenant isolation in multiple collections, or we can do it in one collection. But at the end, who is data belongs to in terms of tenants, not in terms of specific users, is something that became more common in databases in the modern cloud native world. And if you're using a good policy engine, then you can save the part of the application that actually write it. Because in a traditional way, you need to maintain this logic of tenants in your application. You need to get the data, right? You need to get the data, check the tenant in the application, and then determine if a user is allowed or not allowed to this data. It's the same that when you save. If you are connecting the database into or synchronize it with an authorization service, and it can work in multiple ways. And again, we get to the question of the consistency. We can have all the data saved in the policy engine, or we can have a read your write consistency, that if someone trying to read, then the policy engine read the tenant and get the decision. So the policy engine can really help you put the multi-tenant game into role-based access control game. So you don't need to worry either in your database logic or in your application logic about the tenant assignment. You can decouple, you can make sure that every component in your application has the right way to determine what belongs to. So you have your identity provider where you have your users or your management platform. And then you have your users and the tenants that they are belong to. This is the first part that came into the policy engine. Then you have the database and the data that is actually where the data belongs to. And the policy engine can get this decision in a decoupled way from the application logic. So you can make sure that when the application actually needs to do the authorization decision, it gets the fine-grained level of the tenants for free, decoupled from the application logic. And I think Mongo is super powerful with it, because the way that you synchronize things with Mongo and the schemaless way that you can just, tenant is an attribute, is not now a column in one table that you need to join from another table, etc., etc. It's attribute that can live everywhere. You can have in this collection, this column that refer to tenant. You have in the other collection a different attribute that refer to tenant. And the way to connect it to policy engine is super friendly and can be, again, with consistency of eventual consistency, strong, read, write, whatever consistency you choose to connect your database to the policy engine and give you a super cool experience on tenant-based permissions. Again, you can choose the role-based, you can go more complex with the attribute-based. So that was a super great experience to work on it. I think back to the title of the name of the live stream, I think one of the more interesting use cases nowadays, everyone wants to write AI agents. Everyone tries to write AI agents. And I think, from my experience, like I got one of the best experience when I tried the vector capabilities of Mongo. And I think also there you can get super cool, and we can show a later demo on how we can secure a RAG, retrieval or augmented generation system, to create fine-grained AI agents.
Okay. I know we've talked an awful lot of the theory. Maybe, Gabriel, as you say, this is an opportunity to show the demo, that RAG security demo implementation that you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. If you want to share the screen there, and as you're getting ready to do that, if anybody has any questions for what Gabriel is going through, please drop them into the comments section in YouTube or LinkedIn, and we'll try and answer and take care of them live.
I'll just give a short comment before I'm sharing the screen. I'm going to show the demo on multiple applications, so I'm going to share my entire screen. So first, forgive me for the screen recursion when I'm sharing the screen and I'm in the live stream. And forgive me if I get to a window that I'm not supposed to be. But
no problem. This is live after all. No worries. Work away.
Okay, so I'm sharing the screen. And I think I'll start from the last part. You tell me when people can see the screen.
Yeah, that should be clear, and the size, visibility, magnification is perfect, Gabriel, as well too.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
So you're super used to this. You know you're in Postman here. You know your way around. Take your time, because our viewers aren't. So if you can share with us the steps you're going through, that would be great.
Absolutely. I'll start from the end of the demo. We have a simple agent that we built here. This agent is an agent that has a RAG in its backbone. We'll get soon to all the components, but let's start again from the end to let you understand what we are trying to achieve here. So we have a question this is the prompt that someone asked the agent, and it's super simple here, and we just impersonate to user. There is no aspects of authentication. We're just trying to show the permissions. We have here the user with the IT user engineering 2, and they try to ask about, tell me about, let's say, marketing 2024 budget, and I'll send the query, and as you probably can see, the user does not have access to document that can determine anything about the marketing budget.
Right.
Let's change the user. Let's put the user, for example, I also have user marketing 1, and then I'll send the query about the budget, and this user is supposed to get an answer. The marketing budget for 2024 is allocated, blah, blah, blah. And we can also see this is a debug, right? Debug from the RAG. We can also see that the documents that the user is actually allowed to see.
Okay,
right?
very clear.
Now, I think this demo is super straightforward. It's simple, and tons of tweaks to make it work. But the idea is simple. We want some users to have access, and some users to not have access. Now let's take a look on the second cool part of the demo. I'm going here to the permit user management screen. If you remember, the user that we have here, user engineering 2, do not have access to marketing budget. But now let's take user engineering 2 and give them also access to the marketing department. They got to Gabriel, and now they also have access to marketing department. So I'm going to the permit.io dashboard. I have this user here. This is not the right user. I need to change my project. It will take me.
That's all right. See, these are proper live demos. We always so you can see now. Perfect.
Yeah. This is the right environment. Permit has native support for CI/CD, so we have hierarchy of the project that you can create. And we have here user engineering 2. I'm going to edit them and give them another role. I'm going to give them a role in the department marketing and a role of a member. I'll save it. I can see here that I have the policy decision point, actually the container that get the decision for permit. And if I'll send now again the user engineering 2, tell me about
one that didn't work the last time, right? Okay.
Yeah. And then I supposed to get an answer. As you can see here, user engineering 2 that is now assigned with a role in the marketing department, get an answer for the marketing department. Right? Let's take a look on the MongoDB part of the data that we have. So we have here our cluster. As you can see here, we have a lot of documents. We have the marketing plan. All our documents actually in the ingestion, when they are actually, this is based on relationship-based access control, and I think it's super cool that we can see that. Every document that we see in the Mongo, when it ingests to Mongo, it's also created in our graph database. Here is a representation.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, and you can see here that, for example, the CockroachDB document has relationship with the department engineering, and for example, the product roadmap has relationship with the department of marketing, and in our policy, we can see the graph of the permissions, so we can see that a user that is a member of department also get a reader access to the documents that related to this department.
I see. So it's easy able to kind of look through. Okay.
Yeah. And I think the nice thing, you can see also, I personally don't like the graph. I like the table that we can see here.
Okay.
We have a role of a member. It's a combination of role-based access control and relationship-based access control. We have a role of a member of department that they can view the department. And we have a role of document on a read. And the most exciting part of it is that we get implicit grant. A user that has a grant to a department also get implicit grant to all the documents that under the department. So we don't need to ingest every document. If we did it in an access control list, we need to ingest every document to every department, to every member. Now we just need to assign relationship between the document and the member, and that
Mhm.
give implicit grant to a user that is belong to a member, right? Our user do not have relationship with the document, they have relationship with the department. And this give
Okay.
a very super powerful way to, implement such relationship-based access control, relationship-based RAG
Mhm.
into permission-aware agents. And I think that today RAG became idea that is more belong to data scientists, but I think it's an important method to give context and to give data to AI agents. And the way that we do it here, we actually I don't want to dive too much into what is RAG and how it works. So just give a
We've plenty of content up on MongoDB's Developer Center and previous live
absolute.
streams on RAG as well too. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's an easy way for a lot of companies to make sense of their unstructured
Mhm.
data via AI chat tools, essentially. So
Yeah,
for want of a better word.
exactly. And I just want to share a glimpse of the code of what we have here. So we built a demo. This demo is available on GitHub. It's public on
Okay,
GitHub.
great.
Yeah, this call with the fancy name of Permit MongoDB Secure RAG. And the way it works, as we can see here, we have, it's actually a project that is plug and play. There is a Docker Compose file that you just run the Docker Compose and you get everything up and running, including the environment configuration in Permit, including everything. I just had to run this Docker Compose to get everything working for me. So
Mhm.
it make it's similar to the way that we actually work with data sources. We have file watcher that look on docs. In our
Mhm.
case, we just look on documents that is here in the docs file. And as you
That's right.
can see here, we
Okay.
use attributes on every doc to determine the department of this attribute. And we wrote a small watcher that takes this doc. Every
Mhm.
time that the document is changed, it goes to the reback policy and permit and to the Mongo vector DB, right? And
Okay.
then we
Okay.
have our secure RAG that gets the embedding, and the embedding are only ingested with the tags that we have on it. And then in the code itself, permit has integration with LangChain that
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
special retriever. So we can see here the permit self query retriever. This
Yes.
retriever is a classic RAG retriever. It's LangChain, so I'll not dive too much into it. But the special thing here is that you can pass two important attributes. The first one is the user that is
Mhm.
now originator of the agent call. And the
Okay.
second is the resource type that the RAG, and you can put more than that. And the action, it usually read, but some semantics can make it, I don't know, write, view or list or something like that. And then when the RAG will do the vector query, it will make sure that it only allow the ID for the user, only the IDs of the user are part of the query, right? So it's
Okay.
super
Okay.
simple to implement. Again, this demo just give you everything, including the server that we are running with the chat, but it can give you also a good idea on how to actually implement secure RAG that use the powerful MongoDB vector DB and
Okay.
the ability to ingest the data with tagging, with the attributes that actually determine the permission, together with agentic framework that allows you create permissions-aware agents.
Okay. You might just grab the GitHub link there for me, please, Gabriel, so I can
Mhm.
put it into the chat so that we can share it with the viewers as well too, if
Sure.
that's workable. If you
I
drop it
found
in
in
there, I'll
the
copy and
private
paste.
chat.
Perfect. Perfect. That's great.
Mhm.
Let me grab let me grab that to share because I know people will be interested in that. So I'm just going to pop it back out here, and I also just have to drop into LinkedIn because the sync is different. So I'm going to do two posts, one YouTube, one LinkedIn. So hopefully those that are following along will be able to jump there as well too. So they can go in there and see. I liked you went quickly through the reference architecture there. You had the
Mhm.
diagram, and you could clearly see, I suppose, the policy decision point abstracted out of the logic in there as well too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that permit works to keep performance and to make everything close,
Mhm.
permit is work in a hybrid architecture. you have the cloud where you configure the policy, the UI we saw, and you have the PDP. The PDP is a lean a container that can run
Okay.
anywhere. Usually is a sidecar. It can run beside MongoDB, right? It can run beside MongoDB to control the access to the data, or it can run beside the application. It can run together with your front end. It actually depends on where you want to run.
Okay. Perfect. So great to see the demo in action there. Great to do it on the fly, change the user, give them the new permissions, get them back into the document that they tried before. What are the common mistakes most developers do that you would see, or what are the anti-patterns you see developers fall into time and time again in your experience, Gabriel?
I think the most important part of it, and I mentioned it, is to do not decouple policy from the code. So they write the policy rules inside their code, and probably, complex the application logic on one hand, but also on the other end, create a vulnerable way to lose control after access control. I think that the thing that everyone is doing today, right? Everyone is kind of at some sort, even people that are familiar and try to go fine-grained at some point can find themselves writing the policy rules inside their own code, inside the application code, etc. Even if you go fine-grained and even if decouple policy, it's something that actually can hurt the application performance. Again, there is tons of trade-off when you go fine-grained, when you don't think right on centralized data, etc., etc. This could be another thing that could be harder to control, and so.
Okay. Plenty to learn from there. You mentioned earlier on the non-human users, I think, and essentially, they're the BI tools, they're the APIs, they're the agents that we see now. Is there anything else to consider with regard to permissions for those?
I think it's a great question that many people are asking themselves now. How is it? Can you hear me well? Because
yeah, it's fine. No problem. Coming through loud and clear.
I think it's a great question. I think the more we go with the fine-grained permissions and relationship-based, we can get relationship between agents and human users. And the relationship-based access control is open as a gate to a world where we can create relationships using attributes or true data relationships between the human users, the originators, the human user, the non-human users, and the people who control the whole setup, right? So let's think about a usual flow of AI agent. Usually AI agent has three main entities that belongs to permissions to it. The first one is the agent itself, and it could be agent to agent because agents start to chat with each other, not only with humans. The second one is actually the humans themselves, right? The people who are actually chatting with the agents. And the third is the people who creating agents, people who just data to agent, people who deploy agent, people who, for example, it's very common today that people, just indie hacker create a small agent and they don't find the right way to control permissions. So they just, share the agent with all the organization and put a root API key to somewhere because the agent needs to do something. And this thing became very common, not even among developers. Like IT architects can see that every day. Every CISO or friend in security that I'm chatting with say that there is a significant new shadow IT problems with users that are super users because they are technical and they try to enable others with AI. And through enabling other with AI, they just find a way to get a root key to somewhere and just give it to everyone, right?
Right,
And
right.
I
Okay.
think this problem of shadow agent is became
Mhm.
more and more crucial in terms of permissions, because it's not anymore about verifying identities, and understanding the relationships between subjects and users, et cetera, is also something that's important to pay attention to.
Okay, so this, I suppose, looking towards the future, Gabriel, this shadow agents, the permissions that AI needs to access, it's going to make the challenges for developers more complex, is it, in your view?
I think it's super. I wouldn't say again depend, but it's definitely going to create more and more need in fine-grained permissions and decoupling them to policy engine. And that's part of the significant amount of data. I think there is, on the other end, there is an opportunity. Think about from a different perspective on the world of AI agents. One of the most successful agentic frameworks of the last couple of months is Pydantic AI.
Mhm.
And Pydantic AI actually gives the ability to bring structure into the unstructured world of AI. If you're familiar with Pydantic, Pydantic is a framework that try to put structures and types everywhere, right? And
Mhm.
Pydantic AI try to take the same way, so you can look at prompts and build them in a structured way. So one of the problems, let's say, of prompt filtering, you want some users to be allowed to put some prompts, some others put different prompts, etc., etc. And if you put some structuring into that world, and I think the next step in structuring the unstructured world is actually the capability of controlling permissions in a structured
Mhm.
way. So if you can take a look on an agent and say,
Mhm.
okay, this is unstructured text that user prompts and unstructured text that the agent prompts, right? But then you can take it into structured attributes, you can take it into structured relationship, and then you can create better world in terms of permissions. So I think
Mhm.
fine-grained can really enable more secure AI agents. It's fascinating, it's growing in, like, every day you see some cool
Sure.
ways to implement stuff, to model stuff, etc. So, and every day some new protocol or standard or implementation get into the picture and make more indie hackers that try to do things. Just remember, access controlling permission is crucial. I can't forget, like, a couple of months ago on Twitter, indie hacker released on weekend something, and then on Sunday, someone just find that they put the root Supabase key in the repo.
Okay.
Like, you can just grab it from, I don't know, from the, and then it's like, okay, I hate that internet. I'm closing everything. I'm going off. I just did mistake. I think like the awareness of permissions and access control is super important and super, like, crucial for people, especially if they more on the vibe side of the coding and try to
Mm,
get
mm.
super fast and super clear. It's important. And I also, one of the things that I enjoy to see is that I'm chatting with Lovable and chatting with V0, and they say, okay,
Mhm.
if you want the more advanced permission, take permit, take some others. They just ask you for the access key, and they just put on the SDK themselves. So it's super fun. It became part of the jargon of AI code creators.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
yeah, I hope we'll get into a more with more awareness to permissions, and especially for fine-grained permissions.
Yeah. And as you say, Gabriel, it's moving so fast in this space, and there's an awful lot to be, aware of. How do you, in your role as DevRel, essentially keep up to date? How do you keep on top of things? Where do you go to learn, or what blogs or what podcasts, etc.? How do you keep on top of things
So
personally?
I think in DevRel the challenge is even harder than
Mm.
just visual developer, because in DevRel you have two functions. You need to do the read and you need to do the write, which is, make you
Like,
even more
yeah.
challenging. So I think Hacker News is the place that I get the
Okay.
most, like, up to date news. I really like what's going on there, and I actually have. I'm using. I actually use a paid product, so don't say the name, but there are tons of open source products that can send topics from Hacker News to your Slack
Okay.
channel. I can like process the data. So I have notifications on auth. I have notification on access control. We are after 8 now, so I can say that I have also MCP access control notification.
Good, good.
So I actually get a notification and trying to process it all. I think that the biggest tip that I can give is about writing. I'm really
Okay.
like to write as something that I read. Reading things really makes me write, make me tell
Mm,
things. As
that's
Gabriel,
good.
I also get an opportunity to write stuff out of customers meeting, out of listening, to developers that use Permit. But
Mhm.
even these channels can really create, make my brain think more and more in how can I create content on top of this learning and on top of the new thing. And I also use a lot of AI. I have like
Mhm.
machines that generate posts and give me to the ability to approve them before they go. And we built in the team, we built multiple human plus AI machines that help us with syndicate the content, with generate it, with
Okay.
create it in the tones of our. We actually have our own agent that mock the tone of each one of us.
All
So
right.
yeah, I mean,
Brilliant.
we do a lot with AI. I'll say that I'm not one of these people. I can fire you all and just hire AI. I don't think that's the right.
No, we don't want to go there. No.
Yeah, but I think you can exponentially grab your own. One of the method that I use, I think that I haven't wrote an article from scratch for months.
Mhm.
My best friend now is the Google Recorder application in my phone. I find that's the best transcript. Every time I have an idea, five
Yeah.
to 10 minutes, and then use usually ChatGPT to create a good article for me. It's
Mhm.
in my
Mhm.
voice. It has my unique human opportunity, and it does
Mhm.
not require me a week of thinking when I'll get to a focus that I can write an article. I can just be on the bus, on the train. I can even drive and record, a cool article that I have in my mind. Um, so yeah, but
Perfect.
I mean, talking about sources, I think Hacker News and
Okay.
custom notification from it is the my best source to keep on track. I used to use Twitter, but I found it's too much noise for me at the
Mhm.
moment. So I kind of and LinkedIn is good, but again, too much noise. And
Mm.
Hacker News is the source that I can easily control on what I'm reading because I can create notification, get only the articles and the discussions that actually makes me interest and also continue to
Yeah.
contribute back from my personal insights and experience and etc.
Excellent. I love the flow there, and you're using the tools to help yourself be more productive, which they're companions, they're co-pilots, to use that phrase as well too. So I think that's great. We've gone through a huge amount today, Gabriel, and I know conscious of time, conscious of our viewers. If anyone has any questions, drop them in the chat. We've seen some yeah, kind of nice comments coming back through. People are going to check out the repo that you've shared as well too, which is brilliant. Obviously, we've gone through a lot, the different types of access control, role-based and attribute, but you told us all about relationship as well too, which is interesting. The abstraction out then of the logic, into a centralized policy decision point as well too, which has been great. I really learned a lot when you showed through that. If people are getting interested in this topic now, Gabriel, and they're kind of going, wow, all the things that Gabriel's just gone through with us, I need to look at this. What's the one piece that you would say to a developer or a team looking to improve their database permission strategy? What would they do first, or where would they go, or what should they think about?
Well, like one piece of content or like
I suppose no, like the first step. If they're kind of going, "Wow, look, we're building this application, we're building it super fast. We haven't really thought about this at scale. We haven't really thought about what it's going to be like in the future. What tools and kind of architecture should we be thinking of putting in place before we get too far?"
well, I think like I'm biased, so I can just say go to the
That's okay.
I'm creating at Permit.io. Permit.io is a
I was
blog.
hoping that was going to be certainly part of the answer. Definitely, yes.
Yeah. So Permit.io/blog contains tons of good learnings about how to do fine-grained authorization. If you are the people who get more from the theoretical part, I think reading about Google Zanzibar could be
Okay.
super helpful. Yeah,
Mhm.
for that. Um, I think even like I would say like again the permit blog is
Hmm.
actually super helpful. I write there a lot. Many other contributor actually writing there, and we really try to keep our article less vendor specific and more on the ideas and how to do that. So I wouldn't send you to the permit documentation. Also, this can be
Okay.
powerful for them.
Perfect, perfect. So we got a nice comment in from Venkata with, it'll become useful for the fine-tuned models in their products or frameworks, and they're definitely going to check out the repo. That's great. We also got another question just in, and I suppose what's coming down the line for Permit? What else are you kind of going to tease us with going forward into the future, Gabriel, if you can talk about those?
Yeah, so if you asked me a couple of months ago, I would say it's our CLI. We tried to give more
Okay.
integrating experience, and it's super cool for me in Permit that I can being real the bridge between engineering because I also own the SDKs, I own and now the CLI. So we did a very cool CLI open source tool, of course, for developers who want to get more integrated platform. I think the most exciting part that we are working it, and we're still trying to figure out what part of it to get open source. We are now working on a whole platform. You can get an agent.security. We got lucky to find this domain
Oh,
available.
nice, nice. Yeah.
Agent.security. I was send it in Slack and say, I can't believe it's available for only $2,000. And then the CEO says, why you haven't buy it yet? And I'm like, okay, I'll buy it. And it just connected to a platform that we build now for more toward more agent security and agent access control. We start with a cool gateway. You can see the diagrams and everything, and join the wait list on our product. We think that the first thing that will open source there is the gateway decision point for MCPs, but we still try to figure out what is the best contribution we can give to the community to open source from this one and enable developers more with better MCPs and agent security.
Okay, just posting that URL that you managed to find. Well played. I mean, that's superb to be able to get that. It's so hard to get things that are available these days. So that's very fortuitous, most definitely. I'm conscious of time, obviously, and it's been there's so much to learn out of this, Gabriel. So thank you so much. Any final comments from, did we miss something? Did I overlook something? Did I not ask you about something perhaps before we leave our viewers today?
No, I super enjoyed the discussion. I usually it's been some time since I've been hosted in a live stream. I usually
Okay,
host it.
you're on the other side. Yeah.
So it was a super cool experience. I can say that you're a great live stream host, and you just get to the right point of the questions. And I think I'll just say it last time. Permissions and access control is first-class citizen. It's like in the same line on data, front end, etc. It should be some thinking of it, not must like first day go and release fine-grained permissions, but think of permissions and decouple them from the application is super crucial for every application.
I love that. I love that. So a first-class citizen, definitely not an afterthought, or it will come back to bite you in the future if you're not thinking of this as a first-class citizen in terms of your application architecture and with regards, obviously, on the MongoDB podcast, with regard to your database as well, too. Gabriel, this has been superb. It's certainly been a pleasure for me. Half the reason I do these is to learn, and I've certainly learned a lot from you today. So thank you so much. You mentioned it earlier, so if folks want to learn more, they can go to permit.io website, go into the blog there. We posted in the comments the repo, obviously, that we did the example out of earlier, and now just the agent.security, superbly cool domain that you managed to secure as well. So hopefully there's enough there for others to catch up on. Obviously, MongoDB, we're always creating content as well too. We're all in the DevRel space here, Gabriel. So mongodb.com/developer, you'll find our center if you want to try anything out. And we have vector search now on Atlas, and you can build your RAG apps there with the permissions and security that permit.io allows you as well too. So yeah, this has been superb. So I appreciate your time. I'm always honored to have people who are deep domain experts, and obviously given your pathway to here and given your current workload at permit, you're certainly one of those, Gabriel. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. And to all our viewers, it's great as ever to have you. If you didn't catch all of the show, the recording's always up there on YouTube and on LinkedIn as well too. A little harder to find on LinkedIn, so just go to YouTube. It's easier to see our playlist and our live streams that are up there. I do this every Tuesday, or at least most Tuesdays, so please keep an eye out. If you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel or don't follow us on LinkedIn, do, and then you'll get the notifications for future shows like this. But for me, Shane McAllister over on DevRel at MongoDB, to you, Gabriel at DevRel at permit.io, thank you so much. This has been a superb pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Excellent. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.